Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Candidates Forum. My name is Alan Foulds, and I'll be moderating the discussion. Joining me is Rich Hosford, the BNEWS director here at BCAT, to ask the questions. At this session, we're going to be discussing the proposed change from an elected to an appointed town treasurer. The question was initially put forward at the suggestion of the Government Review Committee, and the warrant article at the September town meeting was approved. With us, we have two spokespeople, one for each side of the issue. Phil Gallagher is a former town meeting moderator, former selectman, and current member of the Ways and Means Committee. Bob Hogan is on the Board of Selectmen currently and is vice chair. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, here are the ground rules. Here's how we'll proceed. Each spokesperson will offer a 2-minute opening statement, and we've drawn lots to see who goes first. After that, Rich will be asking questions of the candidates. Here's where it gets tricky. We'll alternate the first response, but after each response, the other person gets to rebut first before then going into his response. Then after 2 questions and potentially 2 rebuttals, we move on to the next question. That clear? Good, all right. After that, each one of you gets to ask the other spokesperson 1 question. Finally, each spokesperson will be given a 2-minute closing statement. Again, we've drawn lots. Actually, we haven't. We're going to keep the same order. That way, we don't have the same person opening and closing. Everybody all set with that? Mm-hmm. All right. By lottery, Bob Hogan is going to go first. So, Bob, you've got the stage.
Thank you. Thank you to BCAT for allowing us to have this opportunity. I thought when I first heard that Brian was retiring, that we would have an opportunity to have a good conversation about who the next person would be in the Treasurer Collector's office, and that an appointment would probably be, at least in my opinion, in the beginning of the conversation, would be the best way to do that. I looked around and talked to a number of people in the state, and an awful lot of communities have moved in that direction. Now, that doesn't mean that's a reason why we should do it, but it certainly is clear that an awful lot of people have been taking a good hard look at the amount of money that's being spent and collected and saved and invested in the communities. And in Burlington, with the budget now rising to about $150 million a year, I think it becomes an important factor in having an appointed position for this, to make sure that we recruit and hire the best, most qualified individual for that position. So I support yes to the appointment process, and hopefully in the next half hour or so, I'll convince you to. Thank you.
Okay, and Phil.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Rich. Very simply, this question is about excluding you, the voter, from the selection process for the person who's going to collect your money and spend your money and invest your money, etc. The question's about consolidation and transfer of power from the voters directly to the executive branch. This would be an enormous alteration of the system that served the town for 50, 60 years. Our system is one of checks and balances. The 3 major power positions which check the power of the executive branch are the moderator, who heads the legislative branch, the town clerk, who is the keeper of the public record and election integrity, and the treasurer tax collector, who's keeper of the town funds and the source of uninfluenced oversight. And by the way, Mr. Curtin, who's been in the position for 42 years, delayed his retirement because he was hopeful that this question would be defeated. The ballot question represents a watershed event in the maintenance of the system of checks and balances. Currently serving under the Board of Selectmen authority are the budget analyst, the town accountant, and the town auditor. On the school side, both the business manager and the finance director report to the executive body. Passage of this question was result in the elimination of the only remaining elected independent financial voice. So if this question is passed, it'll be the last time we'll hear really an independent financial elected voice. And I'd also like to remind you as we go along that when you compare the voters' record of major appointments, major elections versus appointments in the town versus the Board of Selectmen, you'll find that the voters have done a much better job. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now we'll begin the questions from Rich Hosford. Just to let you know how this will work, we're going to alternate the first response, and we'll begin with Bob as a heads up. So Rich will begin with the question.
Okay. As was mentioned in Bob's opening statement, the size of the town government has grown, the size of the budget has grown. Do you agree that the increase of the budget and the complexity of the job means that the expertise of the person holding that position has also increased?
Oh, I absolutely think so. And Brian himself has mentioned that right here on BCAT when he first started having the conversations about retiring, that there is a greater complexity than was years ago. The State Department of Revenue, local services are also indicating that the amount of complexity is such that the operational responsibilities of the treasurer collector has changed dramatically, and in fact should be an appointed position. So yes, I absolutely agree.
Okay, do you have a rebuttal before we
Yeah, I
move
do.
on?
I mean, if that were true, then why wouldn't the state treasurer be appointed and the state auditor be appointed? No, they're not. They're both elected for those reasons, to maintain that type of checks and balance. And the job, yes, the job has complexities, but we have, in Burlington, we had over 900 people who fall into the category of financial services. Not only that, that department has grown as the complexities have grown, although tax collection, et cetera, are all the same, but there's 9 full-time employees who have experience in all of these specialities.
Okay, now you can move
so
on to your answer.
okay,
Yes,
so now
yeah.
I can answer the
A little
question.
complicated, but we'll get there.
Okay, so what have we got? Really, we've got tax collection, we've got insurance, we've got payroll, we've got cash management, we've got retirement, et cetera. Again, there are 9 full-time people in the department with over 100 years of experience in dealing with these issues. Not only that, on the more complex sides of bond issuance, for instance, in insurance and retirement, the town has a bond counsel who reports directly to the treasurer. We also have an insurance actuary who was contracted to the town. And finally, we have many retirement specialists in the system that we're at in the Middlesex County. And finally, I think Mr. Curtin has said that we've got 12 or 13 different banks and investment houses that provide investment expertise. So is this position one of a Lone Ranger who's going to go in here and have to master all of these specialities? No, that's not the case whatsoever. And more importantly, particularly in the tax collector, we have to have somebody who is familiar with the community, has his or her pulse on the community. And I'll give you an example why. The tax collector in the old days, after the Townsend Act and whatnot, you know, the revolutionaries trying to hang the tax collectors. But 42 years, Brian Curtin has not foreclosed. During 5 recessions, 42 years, he's not foreclosed on one single residential property. Not put one family out of their home because of taxation. And yet has not
And wrap it up. Okay,
and has not lost a single taxpayer dollar.
great, thank you. Do you have a rebuttal to that?
A very quick one.
Okay.
I think, yes, the number of people who support the treasurer collector is a large number, including a staff that's quite qualified at the moment. But my concern is that if you have a treasurer collector that doesn't have the requisite skills, doesn't take the guidance and direction that is given to him by the experts, then we're going down a road that's going to lead to catastrophe in our finances.
Thank you. We'll move on to question number 2. Rich?
All right. Do you think the town election process can ensure a qualified candidate, and does the trend of low participation and low voter turnout make a difference in your assessment? of that?
Okay, let me give you examples. In the last 75 years, we've had 4 town clerks. Marty Graham served for 35 years, Kay McKim, Jane Shue, and Amy Warfield. All selected by the voters, none defeated. Okay, since the death of Bob Hogan, we've had 7 moderators. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Bob. Bob
Not
Hogan's,
yet.
I'm sorry, Bob. God, that was an awful mistake. Bob Gordon. Thank you, Rich, for having that horrified look on your face. Since the death of Bob Gordon, over 42 years, we've had 7 moderators and 42 elections every year with 1 defeated. And over that same period of time, we've had 3 selectmen defeated. So the voters have turned out, have been confident in their choices and kept those people that they wanted in those positions. On the other hand, the selectmen have had rather a dubious history of some of their appointments. In 1968, they tried to they put an article forward to make their favorite treasurer at the time treasurer for life. 6 years later, he was indicted for embezzlement. When he was removed from office, the selectmen appointed a favorite to the job, the state representative's brother. He was defeated the next year by a 27-year-old accountant, Brian Curtin. And then lastly, one of the most egregious examples of selectmen appointments was when they replaced the veterans agent. They replaced him with somebody who had just finished several years earlier a term in a federal penitentiary for extortion. So, you know, the voters have done pretty well. Selectmen a little on the dubious side.
Before moving on to your answer, do you have a rebuttal?
One quick question.
Okay.
The numbers can be skewed by the fact that for many of the elections over the last several decades, and even more so now than in the past, there is no competition on the ballot. There's only one person, whether it's a selectman, town moderator, treasurer collector. If there's only one person, then it makes it look good that they've always been reelected. So the numbers can be skewed.
Okay, and Bob, your answer?
Read the question again, please.
Sure. Do you think that the town election process can ensure a qualified candidate, and does the trend of low participation and low voter turnout make a difference in your assessment?
I think the election can, but that's not our argument. Our argument is, what if it can't? What if it doesn't? Then we've got somebody in that seat for 3 years that in fact could do great damage to the town financially. The AAA bonding that we have with Standard & Poor's can be easily swayed into the negative if the financial team has issues and just simply screws up. It could cost us well into the 6 figures, even $1 million over the year, based on the amount of bonding we do here in town.
Okay, and Phil, you have a rebuttal before we move on to the next question?
Well, yeah, I would say this, that it's mostly selectmen overspending that is likely to affect the bond rating as opposed to the treasurer. And also, I'd like to mention that a lot of the times we have people who are unopposed, like would you oppose Eddie Weiner or Dr. Saltzman on the Board of Health, for instance, 2 people on that have 35 years of experience. Eddie served for 35 years. Would you want to oppose Kevin Sullivan, who has an extraordinary track record? So, you know, yeah, the numbers can be skewed, but there's a reason why the electorate doesn't throw people out of office.
Okay, Rich, the next question.
Do you think there's a value in having the treasurer be a Burlington resident, or does that not matter?
Bob, we start with you.
If you take a good look around at the department heads, some extraordinary department heads in Burlington, and few, if any, I don't think any of them actually live in Burlington. Yet when they accepted the responsibility for their departments, have taken it on, have done great work for the town. We've got a fabulous police department, a great fire department, the DPW head, our town accountant, the assessor. There are an awful lot of people who are hired and appointed who don't live in town, who do great work for the town. So no, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Rebuttal?
do,
Okay.
particularly in this position, as I alluded to earlier, particularly in the tax collector. This is somebody who is actually the face of the town financially. You know, every single bill that you pay, you know, your water bill, your tax bill, your personal property bill, your tickets, everything that goes on in town financially, and your property taxes naturally, you know, come forward to the basically to that office. So I think it's important that somebody lives here, has his pulse or her pulse on the community, and if a resident has a problem, they're not going up to a tax collector bureaucrat.
Okay, and your answer to the same question.
My answer, okay, well, my answer is this, is that, and not to cast aspersions on this board, because I've known Bob Hogan for a long time and these other fellows, but what about this board, the next board, the next board after that? The Board of Selectmen's track record on these important appointments has not really been that great, okay? We've hired, with the exclusion of the new guy that just started a week ago, we've hired 4 town administrators and we've fired 2 of them. We've hired 4 town councils and the selectmen have fired 3 of them. So, you know, the idea that that selection and appointing process is, you know, is worry-free and that we're going to have people who are going to serve the town, you know, forever without problems as a result of the selectman appointment, just as a reality based on experience.
And Bob, do you have a rebuttal?
A very quick one. Not all of these positions aren't lifetime appointments, and sometimes things change. Legal counsel, for one. We hired a firm based on one particular attorney in the firm that had a lot of the experience we were looking for. Shortly after we hired the firm and signed the paperwork and the contract, he decided to move on from this particular kind of law, and that firm no longer had the expertise we were looking for. We tried to give it a year to see if it worked, and it didn't work out. So we went out and found a firm that we liked as much during the first round of appointments, and now they're with us. So Lisa Mead is our new lead attorney, and that's the reason for that kind of change.
Now, am I rebutting?
No, I think we're at the end of that question.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, Rich, the next question.
Well, the next question is actually along the same vein, so you can
Yeah,
work
we'll
it in
begin
that way.
with Phil.
Do you think limiting the potential pool of candidates to residents who are interested in running rather than professionals from around the state limits the town's chances of getting the most qualified
No,
person?
the answer to that is no, and actually it's likely to be a lesser pool of candidates from people around the state. Because if you're an appointed person in another community, if you're trying to go up, you're very concerned about whether or not your application will be made public because your appointing authority might view that negatively. Secondly, if you're looking at somebody who's coming from a larger community, well, what is the reason for that? Why is that a problem? And I think if you look at the town accountant that they recently hired, Denisio, from Woburn, a good hire, I believe, but there was a very sparse candidate list there. And to allude to Bob's point about town council, that was an example of a very poor appointment, a very poor selection process by the Board of Selectmen. Why would a $150 million corporation hire what you need is a generalist law firm on the basis of one person? When we had Copeland and Page, we had 8 or 10 people that were involved in a variety of different municipal law. We never appointed them on the basis of somebody just having one level of expertise. So they lose this one person, suddenly they got to fire town council. In my view, that was a very poor decision, a very poor appointment by the Board of Selectmen.
And before your answer, do you have a rebuttal, Bob?
Just that the reason for not rehiring Copeland and Page are very complex, and I don't want to, say negative things about them on the air, but we felt we were justified in making the change at that time, so I'll leave that in.
Okay, and now your answer.
Read the question again.
Absolutely. Do you think limiting the potential pool of candidates to residents who are interested in running rather than from professionals around the states limits the town's chances of getting the most qualified person?
I believe that there's a quirk in the question the way I see it.
Sure.
It doesn't say that the most qualified isn't going to do a better job if they live in Burlington or not. The question is, will the best person get elected if there's an elected process that continues down the road? I believe we have the best chance of guaranteeing the qualified individual by having a process that lets us vet them, lets us take a look at their background, things that don't happen during an election process. So I think, to the question, I think getting people from a wider scope by doing the appointment process works out better.
Okay, Phil, do
Am
you
I
have a rebuttal?
rebutting?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Got to get settled in here. Well, I disagree totally with that, because what is a better selection process? A limited pool of people being reviewed by a small committee appointed by the Board of Selectmen, then 20 or 25-minute public interviews, or a whole pool of 900 or 1,000 people who may have the qualifications to run for this, and then they have to run an 8-week campaign. They do coffee parties, door knocking, ads, TV debates. All of these things, go to the Council on Aging, they go to the library, they go to the Burlington Indian Association, rubbing elbows with the electorate. This is a much more stringent selection process than what we're talking about in a cloistered little group of people. And as far as who's qualified, look at the Ways and Means Committee alone. I'm the junior member there. Look at the number of people there: Harvard grad, MIT grad, what's that one in Pittsburgh? Carnegie Mellon grad, CPAs, all
Almost
kinds
ready
of
to wrap
people
up. Yep.
that have had significant municipal experience on these budgets.
Okay, thank you. Rich, the next question.
All right. Do you believe there's a value in the autonomy for the treasurer's position that they have by being elected by residents rather than appointed?
Begin with Bob.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you think there is value in the autonomy from the other departments the treasurer has by being elected?
No, I don't think the autonomy is the answer by itself. I think that department heads have responsibilities. They know what they are, and it's up to them to fulfill that responsibility. Does that mean that everyone's going to agree with the treasurer collector? No, of course. People are going to have the right to make their opinions heard. And there are discussions and back and forth. So just because they're an elected versus appointed or appointed versus elected doesn't mean that people aren't going to want to have conversations about what their decisions are.
Well,
Okay.
I
Go ahead.
I'm answering the question. Yes.
Are
Not
you answering
rebutting,
or
I'm
you're
answering.
rebutting? Oh, you just
I'm
go
going to
straight-
answer.
straight
I'm
to the
gonna
question.
answer.
Okay.
Yes, I think there's tremendous value in that because if there is an autonomy, you're going to get the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator's point of view, and the appointed person is going to go along. Okay, they're going to go along with what they're instructed by the people who they're loyal to for their job. And in the bylaws, in particular, the treasurer collector is the ad hoc chairman of any issue in the town that involves bonding, any issue in the town. Yet over the years, the boards of selectmen, not just this one, and again, I don't want to cast aspersions on Bob, who's been a dedicated servant in the town for many years. But the selectmen have been resistant to that, okay? The selectmen have been resistant to having somebody independent stand up and say, you're wrong. And the OPEB and the insurance issue, the insurance fund, are two examples of the board wanting to kind of avoid having to dedicate resources to those issues. And because of the autonomy of the treasurer as well as the Ways and Means Committee, said, we have to plan for the future. We got stuck with this. We're going to have to take care of this so that later generations aren't stuck with the problem.
Yeah, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, a very quick one.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for people should know this isn't personal between us.
No, we've served together for
Yeah.
X number of years. No, it's a difference of opinion.
Yeah, a couple of things very quick. We can start the timer. I've been on the board long enough to have been there when OPEB and the insurance fund got their starts. And I, having talked to a number of people, actually was on board rather quickly for both of these. And I'm very proud to have been able to see what the explanation was and how it affected us. The insurance was a huge one when my first year on the board. If someone makes a good argument and there's a good reason for it, then I think you'll find that people will be able to move forward with the idea. And other communities that have changed over, not only recently, but over the years, have not had the kind of problems with the autonomy issue as we're talking about right now.
Yeah, but that's a broad generalization.
Okay,
Bob.
we're ready to move into the next phase here. You each get to ask the other one a question, and we will ask. We'll start with Phil asking Bob.
Okay, Bob, why is it that you're perfectly willing, and the rest of the Board of Selectmen is perfectly willing to rely on the voters to select you, rely on their judgment to select you to serve the town, but you think it's more important to exclude them, and you people select the most important financial position in the town?
Thank you for the question, Phil. I think it's because the skills that I need to do my job are different than the skills that someone needs to do sitting in the seat in the treasurer collector's office. There are laws and rules and regulations that establish what has to be done and when, that are a lot stricter than the policy making that I do. The operational part of what the treasurer collector does is very specific, and that should be an appointed position.
You got a question? Oh,
Okay,
I'm
now,
sorry.
Bob.
Alan, I'm sorry.
Okay, so Bob, you now get to ask Phil a question.
I'm just going to let Phil make a comment on anything that he hasn't made yet for the argument. Obviously, we have different views on what's going on, so I'm not going to ask a specific question, but I'm going to let Phil
And remember, you do have a
address.
closing statement after this, but go ahead,
I
Phil.
can do a closing statement
Yeah.
after that. Well, I think the bottom line here is that there are more than enough people in this town. This is a highly educated town. I'll make the point again about the Ways and Means Committee. 7 or 8 people on there, brilliant people, who could easily do this job. It's not a Lone Ranger job. You have 9 people that are all skilled in these specialties. Then you have the state certification process, and you're also going to have, like Sagarino had, you're going to have Petron State on to mentor Sagarino and sweep him into the job. So too will Curtin bring on whoever the new appointee or elected official is. So, I just don't, that would be my comment on that.
Okay.
It's not rocket science when you have the kind of support that we have within the town for the position.
All right, we'll move into closing statements, and we'll begin with Bob Hogan.
All right, thank you again. Thank you, BCAT, Rich, Alan, Phil, for having this forum for us to have this conversation. I do want to make one comment that we started with tonight. This discussion didn't come from a report or a vote from the Government Review Committee. Yes, the Government Review Committee was meeting at the time this all happened, but the Government Review has never taken a vote, never taken a stand on this particular issue. And their charge was to take a look at should we have more conversations. So I just wanted to clarify that. But I also want to review the numbers that 284 out of the 351 cities and towns, their treasurer/collector are appointed. 24 of them just in the last 5 years have changed over. A lot of people are having these conversations, a lot of people are investigating why, and an awful lot of people have voted in order to make something like this in their community. They vote yes to have the treasurer-collector appointed. So an awful lot of people are moving in that direction, and I think that the town of Burlington should also. So I would ask people to vote yes for the appointment.
Okay, this is really, it'll be the treasurer collector 1 year, and 5 years from now it'll be the Board of Health and the Planning Board, et cetera, because the same argument will be applied. We need to have appointees so that we can streamline the government and have direct authority, and it'll be more efficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I would say to you that, look, the consolidation of power in fewer and fewer people in any organization is a prescription for disaster, and particularly dangerous for government. Just our own state legislature, we've had 3 Speakers of the House indicted and do prison terms. And why? Because we have a consolidation of power there. There's a reason why the state treasurer and the state auditor remain appointed positions. That same logic applies to Burlington. So I would suggest that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're AAA, the lowest debt in the region. We have the lowest debt service in the region. We have one of the lowest tax rates in the region. This is a wonderful place to live. Our fees are very low. Our services are very high. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Vote no. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Alan. Thank you,
Great.
Rich.
Well, this has been a great spirited discussion. Thank you both for coming, Phil Gallagher and Bob Hogan. Also, thank you, Rich Hosford from BNEWS, for asking all the questions. And finally, thank you to Jen Dodge and all of the staff and volunteers here at BCAT. You made this all happen. Remember, Election Day is Saturday, April 6th. The polls are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Make sure you take advantage of that right and responsibility. And thank you for watching.